The bottle of wine felt heavy in my hand, not because of the glass, but because of what it represented. It was a 2018 Cabernet, priced at $40. To most people in this neighborhood, $40 was a rounding error. To the version of Lily my family thought they knew, the struggling administrative assistant living paycheck to paycheck, it was a sacrifice. But to the real me, the chief operating officer of a logistics firm, who had just closed a six-figure deal the week before, it was a test. I stood on the porch of my parents' sprawling colonial house in Connecticut. The wreath on the door probably cost more than my first car. I took a deep breath, the cold December air biting at my lungs, and rang the bell. My mother, Joyce, opened the door. She didn't smile. Her eyes immediately scanned me, starting from my scuffed boots, deliberately chosen, up to my plain wool coat, bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. "You're late," she said, stepping aside but not actually welcoming me in. "Kevin and Brenda have been here for an hour." "Happy New Year, Mom," I said, forcing a warmth I didn't feel into my voice. I held out the bottle. "I brought this for dinner." She took the bottle by the neck, holding it away from her body like it was a dead rodent. She squinted at the label. A small, dismissive scoff escaped her lips. "Oh. How quaint," she said. She didn't put it on the drink cart with the crystal decanters. She walked over to the kitchen counter and placed it behind the blender, effectively hiding it. "We're drinking the Pinot Kevin brought. It's imported. But thank you for the effort, Lily." The effort. That was the phrase of my childhood. "Nice effort, Lily, but look at Kevin." I walked into the dining room. My father, Robert, was sitting at the head of the table, laughing at something my brother Kevin was saying. Kevin, the golden child. The 35-year-old entrepreneur, who had started 5 businesses in 10 years and failed at all of them, yet somehow always drove a new Mercedes. "There she is," Kevin shouted, his face flushed with expensive wine. "The working girl. How's the filing going, Lil? Did you finally learn how to use the stapler?" My father chuckled, swirling his glass. "Be nice, Kevin. Someone has to be the worker bee so the rest of us can enjoy the honey." I took my assigned seat. It was the folding chair brought in from the garage, squeezed between the sideboard and the kitchen door. The visual metaphor wasn't subtle. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Kevin," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I looked across the table at Brenda, Kevin's wife. She looked tired. She was wearing a diamond necklace that I knew, for a fact, Kevin couldn't afford without maximizing credit cards. She gave me a small, tight smile, then looked down at her plate. Dinner was an exercise in humiliation. My mother served the roast beef, giving generous, thick cuts to Kevin and Dad, and the end piece, the dry, burnt heel, to me. "So," Mom said, delicately cutting her meat. "Kevin has some exciting news." "Tell her, sweetie." Kevin puffed out his chest. "I'm expanding the consulting firm. We're looking at buying a commercial property downtown." "Big things, Lily. Big things. You wouldn't understand the complexities of commercial real estate, but it's huge." I chewed the dry meat slowly. I understood commercial real estate better than anyone at this table. I managed a portfolio of warehouses for my company. But I said nothing. "That's great, Kevin," I said. "It is," Dad boomed. "We're very proud. It takes courage to take risks. Unlike some people who are content with mediocrity." He didn't look at me, but the insult landed squarely on my plate. Speaking of mediocrity, Mom chimed in, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. "Lily, we need to talk about your living situation. Aunt Carol tells me you're still in that cramped apartment on 4th Street. It's embarrassing. When my friends ask where my daughter lives, I have to change the subject." "It's within my budget, Mom," I lied. I actually owned a condo in the city, renting out the cramped apartment to keep up appearances. "Well, maybe if you had more ambition, your budget would improve," Kevin sneered. Or maybe you should find a husband to take care of you. Oh, wait. Mark left, didn't he? Can't blame the guy. Who wants a liability? The table went silent. That was a low blow, even for Kevin. Mark hadn't just left, he had cheated on me, and my family knew it. I gripped my fork. My knuckles turned white. The old Lily, the one from 3 years ago, would have cried. She would have apologized for not being good enough. But the woman sitting in the folding chair tonight felt something different. It wasn't sadness. It was a cold, hard knot in the pit of my stomach. Is that all? I asked quietly. Mom sighed, rolling her eyes. Don't be dramatic, Lily. We're just trying to help you. We invited you here out of pity, honestly. We didn't want you sitting alone in that sad little apartment on New Year's Eve. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone could hear. Just finish eating quickly. I need you to clear the table and wash the dishes. The maid is off tonight, and I don't want to ruin my manicure. Plus, it's the least you can do to repay us for the meal. Kevin laughed. Yeah, sing for your supper, Cinderella. I looked around the table. My father was indifferent. My brother was mocking. My mother was cruel. Only Brenda looked uncomfortable, staring into her wine glass. I put my fork down. I hadn't finished the dry beef, but I was done. Of course, I said. I'll handle the cleanup. Good girl, Dad said, turning his attention back to Kevin. Now, son, tell me about this lone structure you were looking at. I stood up and began clearing the plates. As I stacked the china, I realized something terrifying and liberating at the same time. I didn't love these people anymore. And I was fairly certain they never loved me. I carried the stack of plates into the kitchen. The swinging door didn't close all the way. As I turned on the faucet to drown out the noise of my own heartbeat, I heard voices from the dining room. They thought I couldn't hear over the running water. But I turned the water off. The kitchen was pristine, a showcase of white marble and stainless steel that my mother rarely touched. I stood frozen by the sink, a dirty plate in one hand, the sponge in the other. The water was off. The swinging door was cracked open just an inch. The laughter had died down in the dining room. The tone had shifted from mockery to business. Serious business. Are you sure she'll sign it? That was Kevin's voice. He sounded anxious, stripping away the bravado he had worn minutes ago. She'll sign, my father said. His voice was dismissive, arrogant. She always does what she's told. Lily craves approval like a dog craves scraps. If we tell her it's a family emergency, she won't even read the fine print. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sign what? I don't know, Dad, Kevin whined. Her credit score isn't great, is it? I mean, look at how she lives. Actually, my mother interrupted, her voice sharp. I peeked at her mail last time I was at her apartment, using the key she doesn't know I have. Her credit score is surprisingly high. Over 800. She must be frugal. It's perfect for the collateral. I felt a wave of nausea. My mother had broken into my apartment. She was reading my mail. Okay, Kevin said, sounding relieved. Because the bookie, look, these guys aren't like the banks. They don't send letters. They send guys with baseball bats. I need that 100 grand by next week, or they're going to take the car, the house, everything. We've got you covered, son, Dad said soothingly. We'll put the loan in Lily's name. We'll tell her it's for let's say, a medical procedure for your mom. Something regarding her heart. She'll panic and sign. And if she defaults? Kevin asked. My mother laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. Then she defaults. She has nothing to lose anyway. No husband, no real career. Bankruptcy won't kill her. But it would ruin you, Kevin. You have a reputation. Besides, Dad added, if she refuses, we still have the leverage on her apartment. I'm the co-signer on that lease from 5 years ago. I can threaten to revoke it. Tell her she'll be homeless in January. The plate slipped from my hand. I caught it just before it hit the floor, my reflexes fueled by adrenaline. They weren't just mean. They were predators. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear but from a sudden, violent clarity. For 32 years, I had been chasing a carrot on a stick. I thought if I worked harder, if I was quieter, if I was more helpful, they would finally love me. But I was never a daughter to them. I was a resource. I was an insurance policy. I was the scapegoat they could burn to keep their golden child warm. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud break. It was a quiet click, like a lock sliding into place. The tears that had been threatening to spill evaporated. The hurt in my chest cooled into ice. The medical procedure lie. The gambling debt. The invasion of privacy. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the voice recorder app. I tiptoed closer to the door crack. So the plan is set, Dad said. We invite her back for Sunday dinner. We have the notary ready. Joyce, you play up the heart palpitations starting tomorrow. Easy, Mom said. I'll call her in the morning. She's so desperate to be useful, she'll probably drive me to the hospital herself. I hit stop on the recording. I didn't wash a single dish. I carefully placed the dirty plate on the counter. I wiped my hands on the designer towel. I walked out the back door, through the mudroom, and into the cold night air. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make a scene. I walked to my car, a modest sedan parked down the street, because Mom didn't want it in the driveway. As I sat in the driver's seat, I didn't turn the engine on immediately. I sat in the dark, breathing in the silence. They wanted a war. They wanted to use me one last time to save Kevin from his own stupidity. They thought I was the weak, compliant Lily. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I pulled up my contacts list and scrolled down to S. Sarah, forensic audit. It was New Year's Eve. She was probably at a party. But I dialed anyway. She answered on the second ring. Lily? Happy New Year. Why are you calling? Is everything okay? Sarah, I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears. Steady. Devoid of emotion. I need you to open a file. A personal one. Okay. Sarah's tone shifted instantly to professional mode. Who is the target? My parents, I said. Joyce and Robert Miller. And my brother, Kevin. I want to know everything. Every bank account, every debt, every asset. And Sarah? Yeah. I want to know why my name has been coming up on credit alerts for accounts I never opened. Consider it done, Sarah said. I'll start the preliminary search tonight. Lily, what did they do? They tried to sell me out, I whispered. Now I'm going to cash them out. I started the car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror at the house. It looked warm and inviting from the outside, glowing with holiday lights. But I knew it was rotten to the core. I wasn't coming back as a daughter. I was coming back as an executioner. 2 days later, I was sitting in Sarah's home office. The room was a stark contrast to my parents' house. Where theirs was cluttered with decorative pillows and fake status symbols, Sarah's was minimalist and functional. 3 monitors hummed on her desk, displaying spreadsheets that looked like the Matrix code to the untrained eye. Sarah placed a mug of black coffee in front of me. You're not going to like this, Lily. I don't need to like it, I said, leaning forward. I just need the receipts. Sarah clicked her mouse, bringing up a complex flowchart on the center screen. Okay, let's start with the basics. Your brother, Kevin. He's not just in debt. He's drowning. He owes about $80,000 to legally recognized creditors, but I found huge cash withdrawals that suggest shadow debt, likely illegal gambling. I figured that, I said, sipping the coffee. He mentioned guys with bats. Right. But here is where it gets interesting. Sarah pointed to a red line connecting Kevin to my parents. Mom and Dad have been bleeding money to keep him afloat for 5 years. They remortgaged the house, the one they claim is paid off twice. They have almost zero equity left in that colonial. I blinked. They act like they're rich. Dad just bought a boat. Leased, Sarah corrected. Everything is leased. The cars, the furniture, the boat. They are living on a mountain of credit. But that's not the crime, Lily. Being bad with money isn't illegal. This is. She pulled up another document. It was a property deed history. I ran a full asset search on your social security number. Did you know you are the registered owner of a limited liability company called J&R Holdings? No, I said, a chill running down my spine. I've never heard of it. Well, J&R Holdings owns a cabin in Lake Tahoe. A very expensive cabin. And according to the tax records, it's been renting out for substantial profit for the last decade. I stared at the screen. Lake Tahoe. My grandparents lived near there before they passed. We used to go there as kids. Who opened the LLC? I asked. You did, Sarah said. Or rather, someone with your name and social security number did, 10 years ago. When you were 22. The signature looks like yours, but the notary stamp, that belongs to a friend of your father's. They forged my signature, I realized. Why? Tax evasion, Sarah explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. They put the asset in your name to shield it from their own creditors and to lower their tax bracket. But here's the kicker, the income from the rentals. It doesn't go to you. It goes into a joint account under J&R Holdings that your mother has signature authority over. They've been siphoning the rent money, about $4,000 a month, straight into their pockets, while the tax liability accrues in your name. I felt the anger bubbling up again, hot and sharp. They are using me as a tax shelter. It gets worse, Sarah said softly. She swiveled her chair to face me. I dug into the history of that cabin. It wasn't bought by J&R Holdings. It was transferred into it. Transferred from the Sterling Trust. Sterling. I frowned. That was my grandfather's middle name. Arthur Sterling Miller. Exactly. Lily, did you ever see your grandfather's will? No, I shook my head. Mom said he died in debt. She said there was nothing left but old furniture. Sarah handed me a printed document. It was grainy, a scan of an old legal filing. Your grandfather didn't die in debt. He died with a multi-million-dollar estate. He set up a trust. I can't see the full details of the trust because it's sealed, but I can see the trustees. Your parents. And the beneficiary? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah pointed to a line at the bottom of the page. The beneficiary is listed as the grandchild. Singular. And considering Kevin was already written out of the grandfather's life for stealing his coin collection when he was 20. I have a strong suspicion about who that grandchild is. The room spun. My grandfather, the only person in the family who had ever looked at me with kindness, who taught me how to fish and read books. My parents told me he died penniless. They told me they had to pay for his funeral out of their own pockets. They stole it, I said. They stole my inheritance. They didn't just steal it, Sarah said, her voice hard. They are using the stolen asset, the cabin, to generate income, hiding it under your identity so they don't get taxed, and spending the money on the brother who your grandfather despised. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the world looked normal. People were walking dogs, cars were driving by. But inside, my entire history was being rewritten. Every time I struggled to pay rent in college, every time I ate instant noodles, every time my mother mocked my cheap clothes, they were spending my money. Can we prove it? I asked, turning back to Sarah. We have the digital trail, Sarah said. But to nail the coffin shut, you need the original trust document. You need to know exactly what the terms were. Do you know who handled his estate? Mr. Sterling, I said. No relation. Just a coincidence. Oldman Sterling. He had an office downtown. Is he still alive? I don't know. I grabbed my coat. I'm going to find out. Lily, Sarah warned. If you go digging and they find out, they will circle the wagons. They will destroy evidence. Let them try, I said, buttoning my coat. They think I'm the rabbit. They don't know I've brought a wolf. I looked at Sarah. She grinned. I'm the wolf. You're the wolf, I confirmed. Keep digging, Sarah. Find every penny. I'm going to see a lawyer. The office of Sterling and Associates smelled of old paper, mahogany, and time standing still. It was located in a pre-war building downtown that had managed to escape gentrification. I wasn't even sure if Mr. Sterling was still practicing, or if he was even alive. The receptionist was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on a chain. Can I help you? I'm looking for Mr. Arthur Sterling, I said. My name is Lily Miller. My grandfather was. Before I could finish, the heavy oak door behind her opened. A man who looked to be in his 80s, leaning on a cane but dressed in an impeccable three-piece suit, stepped out. He stopped dead when he saw me. Lily, he rasped. His eyes, milky with age but still sharp, widened. Little Lily. Mr. Sterling, I said, relief washing over me. I didn't know if you'd remember me. Remember you? He shuffled forward, ignoring his receptionist. My dear, I have been waiting for you to walk through that door for 2 years. Come in. Immediately. I followed him into his office. It was lined floor to ceiling with law books. He motioned for me to sit in a leather chair that swallowed me whole. 2 years? I asked. Why 2 years? Because, he said, lowering himself slowly behind his desk. The Sterling Trust, established by your grandfather, expired on your 30th birthday. That was 2 years ago. The terms stated that upon turning 30, full control of the assets would transfer from the trustees, your parents, to the sole beneficiary. You. My breath hitched. I never knew about a trust, Mr. Sterling. My parents told me he died with nothing. Mr. Sterling's face darkened. The grandfatherly warmth evaporated, replaced by the steel of a veteran attorney. They told you nothing. They told me they paid for his funeral. Mr. Sterling slammed his hand on the desk. Dust motes danced in the air. Lies. Your grandfather left nearly $2 million in liquid assets and the property at Lake Tahoe. The funeral was prepaid. The education fund was fully endowed. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound file. He slammed it on the desk. Your parents were named trustees because you were a minor when he passed. Their only duty, fiduciary duty, was to manage the money for your benefit until you turned 30. I have been sending letters to your address for 2 years asking why you haven't come to claim the title transfer. I never got any letters, I said, my voice shaking. I moved out. My mail still goes to their house sometimes. Or they intercept it. Mr. Sterling's face turned a shade of purple I hadn't seen before. He opened the file and began flipping through pages. If they intercepted legal correspondence, if they concealed the existence of the trust, that is criminal fraud, Lily. That is embezzlement. They've been using the cabin, I said, recounting what Sarah found. Renting it out. Putting the money into a joint account. Using my name for tax evasion. Mr. Sterling listened, his jaw tightening with every sentence. When I finished, he sat back, looking tired but furious. Lily, he said quietly. Your grandfather knew your parents were difficult. He feared your brother's influence. That is why he skipped a generation. He wanted to ensure you were safe. He wanted you to have freedom. He pushed the file toward me. This belongs to you. Legally, you are the owner of the Tahoe property. You are the owner of the investment accounts, or what's left of them. If they have spent the principal. They have, I said. They're broke. They're trying to trick me into taking a loan for them right now. Mr. Sterling picked up his phone. He didn't dial immediately. He looked at me over his spectacles. I can file an emergency motion today. We can freeze everything. We can have the police at their door by dinner time. No, I said. The word surprised him. No? Not yet, I said. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. If we struck now, they would play the victim. They would hide assets. They would gaslight the extended family. I needed them to admit it. I needed undeniable proof of their intent to defraud me further. I need them to hang themselves, Mr. Sterling. They are planning to make me sign a fraudulent loan document this Sunday. I want to let them try. Mr. Sterling studied me. He saw the change. He saw the cold calculation in my eyes. He smiled, a grim, shark-like smile. Your grandfather had that same look when he was closing a deal, he said. Very well. But we need to protect you. I will draw up a document. An affidavit of truth. And I will prepare the transfer of deeds immediately. By the time you sit down at that dinner, you won't just be the victim. You will be the legal owner of the roof over their heads. Wait, I said. The house they live in, the Colonial. It was purchased with a down payment from the trust, 20 years ago, Mr. Sterling revealed. Technically, under the tracing rules of the trust, if they use stolen funds to pay the mortgage, the trust has a claim on that house too. I sat back. The scope of their theft was massive. They had built their entire life on my inheritance, all while treating me like a servant in the house I effectively paid for. Prepare the papers, Mr. Sterling, I said, standing up. I'm going to dinner. As I left the office, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Mom, hi honey. Hope you're not still sulking about New Year's. We're so worried about you. Come for Sunday dinner. I'm making your favorite pot roast. And bring that nice friend of yours, the lawyer. Maybe she can give Kevin some advice. She meant Maya, my friend from college who was a corporate attorney, not Sarah. They wanted a lawyer present to legitimize their scam. I typed back, sounds great, Mom. I'll be there. I stared at the screen. Pot roast. My favorite was lasagna. Kevin's favorite was pot roast. They couldn't even get the manipulation right. The pieces were coming together, but I needed to know the enemy's current formation. I needed to know exactly how desperate they were. I decided to test the waters with Aunt Carol. Carol was my mother's sister, but she had always played the role of the cool aunt. She was the one who slipped me $20 when Mom was screaming at me. She was the one who told me I was pretty when Kevin called me ugly. I met her at a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and the suburbs. She hugged me tight, smelling of lavender and expensive perfume. Oh, Lily, she sighed, holding my hands across the small table. I heard about New Year's. Your mother is, well, you know how she is. She doesn't mean it. She seemed to mean it, Aunt Carol, I said, watching her face carefully. They humiliated me. They're just stressed, Carol said, taking a sip of her latte. Financial stress makes people do crazy things. You know, if you could just help them out this one time, with that loan they mentioned. It would smooth everything over. I froze. I hadn't told Carol about the loan. The loan was discussed behind closed doors after I had supposedly left the house. How do you know about the loan, Carol? I asked softly. Her eyes flickered. A micro-expression of panic. Oh well, your mother mentioned it. She said they were going to ask you. Lily, family helps family. And honestly, if they lose the house, where will they go? You don't want that on your conscience. My conscience is clear, I said. Carol, did Mom tell you why they need the money? Medical bills, Carol said quickly. Too quickly. For her heart. Right. Her heart. Then, I saw it. Her phone was face up on the table. A text popped up. It was from Joyce. The font was large enough for me to read upside down. Joyce, is she buying it? Make sure she feels guilty. Tell her I was crying all night. My stomach dropped. Carol wasn't the neutral peacekeeper. She was a flying monkey. She was recon. My mother had sent her here to soften me up, to manipulate me emotionally, so I would be pliable for the slaughter on Sunday. I have to go, I said, standing up abruptly. Lily, wait. Think about the family. Carol called after me. I walked out to the parking lot, rain starting to drizzle. I felt surrounded. Was there anyone in this family who wasn't compromised? As I unlocked my car, a figure stepped out from behind a pillar. I jumped, clutching my keys as a weapon. Lily, don't scream. It was Brenda. Kevin's wife. She was wearing a trench coat and a baseball cap, looking like she was trying to avoid the paparazzi. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Brenda? What are you doing here? I followed you, she said, her voice trembling. I saw you meeting Carol. I knew she would feed you lies. You followed me. I stepped back. Are you in on it too? Did Kevin send you? Kevin doesn't know I'm here, Brenda hissed. She looked around nervously. If he knew, he'd kill me. Lily, you can't sign those papers on Sunday. I know, I said. I know about the gambling. Brenda let out a jagged sob. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She shoved it into my hands. It's not just gambling, she whispered. It's everything. He's been stealing from his own company. He's been stealing from your parents. And she choked up. He has a girlfriend in the city. He pays for her apartment with the money he steals. I looked at the envelope. What is this? Copies, Brenda said. I've been collecting them for months. Bank statements, text messages, photos of him with her. I was going to use them for my divorce. But if you sign that loan, he gets access to fresh cash. He'll disappear, Lily. He's planning to take the money and run to Mexico with the girl. He's going to leave your parents with the debt. He's going to leave you with the debt. I stared at her. Brenda, the woman I thought was a superficial trophy wife, was actually a hostage planning her escape. Why are you giving this to me? I asked. Because I heard what they said about you, Brenda said, looking me in the eye. At dinner. After you left. They laughed, Lily. They laughed about how easy it was to use you. And I looked at my daughter, little Emma, and I thought, is this how they're going to treat her one day? She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Destroy him, Lily. Please. Burn it all down. If you take him down, I can get full custody. I can be free. You're willing to testify? I asked. Just tell me when, she said. The rain was coming down harder now. I looked at the envelope in my hand. It was heavy. It was the ammunition I needed. Sunday, I said. Be at dinner. Act normal. When I put a red folder on the table, that's your signal to take Emma and leave the room. Brenda nodded, wiping rain and tears from her face. Thank you. No, I said. Thank you. I watched her drive away. I stood in the rain for a moment, feeling the weight of the envelope. I had the forensic accounting. I had the original trust documents from Mr. Sterling. I had the recording of their conspiracy. And now, I had the dirt on Kevin. The creative toolkit was complete. I got into my car and tossed the envelope onto the passenger seat. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look like the victim anymore. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. Joyce, did you have a nice talk with Carol? She loves you so much. See you Sunday. Don't be late. I typed back, I wouldn't miss it for the world. The preparation for Sunday felt less like getting ready for a family dinner, and more like prepping for a covert military operation. Saturday night, I sat in my condo with Sarah and Mr. Sterling, who had insisted on joining via video call. We treated the dining table like a war room. Okay, Sarah said, pointing to a stack of papers. This is the kill shot. It's the forensic trace of the unauthorized transfers from the JNR Holdings account to your mother's personal account, labeled as consulting fees. It proves intent to defraud. And here, Mr. Sterling's voice crackled over the speaker, is the affidavit of ownership. Once you present this, you are establishing that you are the landlord and they are, well, squatters, essentially. I have also prepared a cease and desist regarding the use of your identity. What about the police? I asked. We don't call them yet, Mr. Sterling advised. Civil matters are messy. If you call them now, the police will say it's a family dispute. You need them to commit an act of aggression, or admit to a crime in the presence of a witness, or on record. Or, better yet, let them call the police. Why would they call the police? Sarah asked. Because, I said, staring at the plan. When I tell them I own the house, they're going to panic. They're going to try to remove me. They'll call the cops to claim I'm trespassing. And when the cops come, I show the deed. Brutal, Sarah grinned. I love it. Sunday morning arrived with a gray, ominous sky. I dressed carefully. No more poor Lily clothes. I wore a tailored black blazer, a silk blouse, and the expensive heels I usually kept for board meetings. I put on my diamond studs. I applied makeup that sharpened my features. I taped a small, high-quality digital recorder to the inside of my blazer pocket. I checked the battery. Full. I drove to the house. My stomach wasn't fluttering this time. It was a block of concrete. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Kevin's Mercedes. It was parked crookedly, taking up 2 spots. Typical. I grabbed the red folder. Inside were the documents from Sarah, Mr. Sterling, and the copies Brenda gave me. I rang the doorbell. Dad answered this time. He was wearing a sweater vest, trying to look like the benevolent patriarch. He saw my clothes and blinked. He wasn't used to seeing me look expensive. Lily, he said, forcing a smile. You look different. Did you get a haircut? Something like that, I said, stepping past him. The smell of pot roast filled the air. It was heavy, greasy. Lily. Mom came rushing out of the kitchen. She was wearing an apron, playing the role of the doting mother perfectly. She went to hug me, but I stiffened. She pulled back, confused. Is everything okay? She asked. Just tired, I said. Where's Kevin? In the living room with the notary, she whispered. Now, Lily, listen. We have a little surprise. A business opportunity for the family. We just need your help with some paperwork. It's a formality, really. A formality, I repeated. Like the medical procedure. Mom didn't even flinch. Exactly. It's to secure the funds for my treatments. And to help Kevin invest. It's a win-win. I walked into the living room. Kevin was sitting on the sofa, his leg bouncing nervously. A woman I didn't recognize, the notary, sat opposite him with a stack of papers. Brenda was in the corner, holding little Emma. Brenda looked up. Our eyes locked. She gave a microscopic nod. "Hey, sis," Kevin said, too loudly. "Ready to save the day?" "I'm always saving the day, aren't I, Kevin?" I said, sitting down in the armchair. I placed the red folder on the coffee table. "What's that?" Kevin pointed at the folder. "Just some work stuff," I said breezily. "So, talk me through this. What am I signing?" Dad sat down on the arm of the sofa. "Well, honey, it's a loan application. A consolidation loan. We're putting it in your name because, well, to build your credit. It's a favor to you, really. We'll make all the payments." "How much is it for?" I asked. 300,000, the notary said, looking bored. 300,000, I repeated. "That's a lot of money for heart medication, Mom." Mom put a hand on her chest. "It's expensive specialist care, Lily. You can't put a price on your mother's health, can you?" I looked at Kevin. "And none of this is for gambling debts." The room went dead silent. Kevin's eyes darted to Dad. "Don't be ridiculous," Kevin snapped. "I don't gamble." "Who told you that, lies?" "Just a rumor," I said. I leaned back. "Okay. Let me see the papers." The notary pushed the stack toward me. I picked up a pen. My parents exchanged a look of triumph. They thought they had won. They thought the stupid, obedient Lily was back. They were practically salivating at the thought of the money. I hovered the pen over the signature line. "You promise you'll make the payments?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, a calculated acting choice. "Of course, honey," Dad said. "We promise." "And this is the only way?" I asked. "If I don't sign this, what happens?" "If you don't sign," Mom said, her voice dropping, the sweetness becoming sharp, "then we have a big problem, Lily. We might have to reevaluate your living situation. You know Dad co-signed your lease. We'd hate to see you on the street." There it was. The threat. The coercion. Recorded in high definition. I looked at the notary. "Did you hear that? They are threatening me with homelessness if I don't sign." The notary looked uncomfortable. "I'm just here to witness the signature, ma'am." "Right," I said. I lowered the pen. The tip touched the paper. Kevin leaned forward, holding his breath. Then, I drove the pen through the paper, tearing a massive hole in the document. "What the hell are you doing?" Kevin screamed, jumping up. I threw the pen across the room. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. "I'm not signing," I said calmly. "And neither are you." Dad stood up, his face red. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you." "Sit down, Robert," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a command in it that made him pause. I reached for the red folder on the coffee table. "The playtime is over," I said. "Now, let's talk about who actually owns this house." The atmosphere in the living room shifted instantly from tension to confusion, and then to volatility. The tear in the loan document sat there like a wound. "What are you talking about?" Mom asked, her voice shrill. "Who owns this house?" "We do. We've lived here for 20 years. I opened the red folder. I pulled out the first document, the copy of the original deed and the trust tracing funds. Actually, I said, tossing the document onto the coffee table. You don't. This house was purchased with funds from the Arthur Sterling Trust. A trust that I am the sole beneficiary of. Kevin snatched the paper up. He tried to read it, but his hands were shaking. This is legal mumbo-jumbo. It doesn't mean anything. It means, I said, locking eyes with my father, that you used my inheritance to buy this house. You used my inheritance to buy Kevin's cars. You used my inheritance to fund your lifestyle. And 2 years ago, when I turned 30, the legal title of all assets in the trust transferred to me. Automatically. You spoke to Sterling. Dad whispered. His face went pale. He knew. He had always known. I did, I said. He says hello. He also says you're looking at about 10 to 15 years for fraud and embezzlement if we take this to a criminal court. You wouldn't, Mom hissed. She stepped toward me, her hands curled into claws. We are your parents. We gave you life. You gave me a life of servitude. I shot back, my voice finally rising. You made me feel worthless while you spent my money. You made me clean your dishes while you stole my future. We were protecting you. Dad shouted. You weren't ready for that kind of money. You're weak, Lily. You would have wasted it. Wasted it. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Like Kevin wasted it. Like the $80,000 in gambling debt. I pulled out the second stack of papers, Brenda's evidence. I tossed the photos of Kevin at the casino and the bank statements onto the table. There's your investment genius, I said to my parents. He didn't need a loan for business. He needed it because the bookies are going to break his legs. Kevin lunged. You bitch. Where did you get that? He grabbed my arm. Kevin, stop. Brenda screamed from the corner. She stood up, shielding Emma. Don't touch me, I said, my voice icy. If you touch me, I add assault to the list of charges. Kevin let go, breathing heavily. He looked at the photos. Then he looked at Brenda. You. Kevin realized. You gave her these. I'm leaving you, Kevin, Brenda said, her voice shaking but clear. I'm taking Emma. And I'm testifying. Get out. Mom screamed at Brenda. You traitor. Get out of my house. It's not your house, Joyce, I said. It's mine. I pulled out the final document. The eviction notice. This is a formal notice to quit, I said. Since you are technically squatters on my property, and since you have engaged in hostile behavior, I am giving you notice. You need to vacate the premises. You can't do this, Dad sputtered. It's New Year's weekend. You can't kick your parents out on the street. You were going to kick me out. I reminded him. You threatened me with homelessness 10 minutes ago if I didn't sign a fraudulent loan. I'm just returning the favor. My mother looked around the room, her eyes wild. Her reality was crumbling. The narrative she had built, that she was the queen, and I was the peasant, was being inverted. She couldn't handle it. I'm calling the police, she screamed. She grabbed the landline. I'm calling the police. You are trespassing. You are harassing us. I'll tell them you hit me. Mom, don't, Kevin warned, realizing the danger. No, let her, I said. I crossed my arms and sat back down. Go ahead, Mom. Call 911. Tell them to come. I'd love to show them the deed. Mom dialed. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons. Yes. Police. I need help immediately. My daughter, she's crazy. She's threatening us. She's refusing to leave. She hung up and looked at me with a triumphant sneer. They're coming. You're going to jail, Lily. No, Mom, I said softly. I'm not. I looked at the notary, who was frantically packing her bag. You might want to stay, I told her. We're going to need a witness. The siren wailed in the distance. It was getting closer. The wail of the sirens grew louder, cutting through the silence of the living room like a knife. My mother was pacing, wringing her hands, muttering to herself about how ungrateful I was. My father was slumped on the sofa, staring at the trust documents, as if hoping the words would change. Kevin was glaring at Brenda, who stood by the door, clutching Emma and her car keys. I sat perfectly still. The adrenaline was pumping, but my mind was clear. This was the moment I had prepared for. Heavy footsteps pounded on the porch. A sharp rap on the door. Police. Open up. Mom rushed to the door, throwing it open theatrically. 2 officers stood there. One was a tall, older sergeant, the other a younger rookie. Officer. Thank God. Mom cried, grabbing the sergeant's arm. She's crazy. She broke in. She's threatening to kill us. Please get her out. She pointed a shaking finger at me. The sergeant looked at me. I was sitting calmly in the armchair, legs crossed, dressed in business attire. I didn't look like a crazy intruder. Ma'am, the sergeant addressed me. Is this true? I stood up slowly, keeping my hands visible. No, officer. It is not true. I am not trespassing. I am the owner of this property. She's lying. Dad shouted, standing up. She's our daughter. She's delusional. Officer, I said calmly. I have the deed right here. And I have identification. I picked up the documents from the coffee table and walked over to the police. Mom tried to block me, but the rookie officer stepped between us. Step back, ma'am, he said firmly. I handed the sergeant the affidavit of ownership and the property records Mr. Sterling had prepared. This house is held in the Arthur Sterling Trust. I am the sole beneficiary and trustee as of 2 years ago. These people, my parents, were the former trustees, but they have been illegally occupying the property and misappropriating funds. The sergeant frowned, reading the legal header. He looked from the paper to me, then to my parents. Mr. Miller, the sergeant asked my father. Is your name on the deed? Well, it's complicated, Dad stammered. It's a family trust. We are her guardians. I am 32 years old, officer, I said. I don't need a guardian. And here is the notice to quit, I just served them. They became hostile when I asked them to leave. We live here. Kevin shouted. You can't just kick us out. Actually, the sergeant said, handing the papers back to me. If the deed is in her name, and there is no lease agreement, she can ask you to leave. This is a civil matter regarding the eviction, but regarding the trespassing, if the owner wants you gone, you have to go. This is insane. Mom shrieked. I'm calling my lawyer. You should, I said. Because I'm pressing charges for the assault Kevin committed against me 5 minutes ago, and for the attempted fraud regarding this loan application. I pointed to the torn paper. Assault. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. He looked at Kevin. He grabbed me, I said. My sister-in-law witnessed it. Brenda? All eyes turned to Brenda. She took a step forward, her voice trembling but brave. It's true. Kevin grabbed her. He was violent. And he has illegal gambling debts. That's why they were forcing her to sign the loan. Brenda, shut up. Kevin lunged toward her. Hey. The rookie officer tackled Kevin before he could reach his wife. They hit the floor with a thud. Get off him. Mom screamed, jumping on the officer's back. Ma'am, get back, the sergeant yelled. It was chaos. My mother was clawing at a police officer. My brother was being cuffed on the Persian rug he claimed was his. My father was watching his world burn. I stood in the center of the storm, untouched. "You are all under arrest," the sergeant announced, struggling to restrain my screaming mother. "Assault on an officer. Resisting arrest. Domestic disturbance." They dragged Kevin out first. He was crying, begging Dad to fix it. Then they took Mom. She was wailing, her mascara running down her face, looking at me with pure hatred. "I have no daughter," she screamed as they shoved her into the cruiser. "You are dead to me." "The feeling is mutual, Joyce," I whispered. Dad was the last to go. He wasn't arrested, as he hadn't physically attacked anyone yet, but the police told him he had to vacate the premises immediately if I insisted. He looked at me. He looked small. Old. Defeated. "Lily," he said, his voice cracking. "Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at the man who had threatened to make me homeless just an hour ago. "I hear the Motel 6 on the highway has vacancies," I said. "It fits your budget." "You can't do this," he pleaded. "We're family." "No, Dad," I said, opening the front door for him. "Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't prey on family. You taught me that everything is a transaction. Well, the bill has come due." He stared at me for a long moment. Then, he hung his head and walked out into the rain. I watched him go. I watched the police cars drive away with the flashing lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Brenda came up beside me. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath. The house was silent. The air felt lighter. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm free." We stood there for a moment. Then I turned to Brenda. "Pack your things," I said. "You and Emma can stay here tonight. But tomorrow we change the locks." "And the furniture?" Brenda asked, looking around at the expensive decor. "Sell it," I said. "Sell all of it. Except for the folding chair in the dining room." "Why the folding chair?" "To remind me," I said, "of where I used to sit. And why I'm never sitting there again." The silence that followed the police sirens was heavier than the noise. It wasn't an empty silence, it was a pregnant pause, the kind that happens after a storm tears the roof off a house, and you are left standing there, staring at the sky, realizing you survived. Brenda was sitting on the sofa, clutching Emma, rocking her back and forth. I walked over to the front door, which was still wide open, letting in the damp chill of the January rain. I closed it. I locked the deadbolt. Then I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 10 years old. They were gone. The house, usually vibrating with the tension of my mother's passive-aggressive humming or Kevin's loud phone calls, was dead quiet. "I called a locksmith," I said, turning back to the room. My voice sounded steady, which surprised me. "He charges triple for Sunday emergency calls, but I don't care. I want this place secured before nightfall." Brenda looked up, her eyes red. "Lily, they're going to come back. Once they post bail, or once your dad leaves that motel, they'll come back." "Let them try," I said. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, and I have the deed. If they step foot on this lawn again, it's criminal trespassing. Mr. Sterling already filed the restraining orders electronically. By tomorrow morning, a judge will sign them." While we waited for the locksmith, I did something I had never been allowed to do. I went into my father's study. This room was always forbidden territory, the sanctum, where he allegedly conducted important business. I sat in his leather chair. It squeaked. I opened the top drawer. Inside, I didn't find business plans or investment portfolios. I found a graveyard of financial incompetence. There were stacks of unopened letters from collection agencies. Notices of default on credit cards I didn't even know existed. And then, at the bottom, a ledger. My father, for all his faults, was old school. He wrote things down. I opened the ledger. It was a manual record of the Sterling Trust withdrawals. My heart hammered against my ribs as I traced the lines with my finger. June 2018, $15,000 Kevin's startup capital lost. August 2019, $8,000 Joyce's cruise, medical recovery. December 2020, $45,000 Kevin's legal fees, DUI. I stared at that last entry. A DUI. They had told me Kevin needed money that year because his car broke down, and he needed a rental for work. I had sent them $2,000 of my own savings to help. They had taken my money, while simultaneously draining $45,000 from my trust fund to cover up Kevin's drunk driving arrest. The rage that flared up wasn't the hot, explosive kind I felt at dinner. It was cold. It was calculating. It was the fuel I needed to ensure they never recovered from this. Lily? I looked up. Sarah was standing in the doorway. She had let herself in. I must have left the front door unlocked for the locksmith. She held up her phone. I got the alert, she said, walking over and looking at the ledger over my shoulder. Sterling called me. He said the police report is already filed. Kevin is being held without bail because of the flight risk. Apparently, Brenda's tip about Mexico checked out. They found a one-way ticket confirmation on his phone. And Mom? Released on her own recognizance, but she has a stay-away order. She's at the Motel 6 with your dad. Sarah paused, looking at the numbers in the ledger. My God. They really burned through almost everything liquid, didn't they? They left the real estate, I said, closing the book. Because they needed a roof over their heads. That was their mistake. They thought the house was theirs. They forgot who actually paid for it. The doorbell rang. It was the locksmith, a burly guy named Mike who looked like he had seen it all. Change 'em all, he asked, looking at the fancy brass hardware. Every single one, I said. Front door, back door, garage, side gate. And Mike? I need something heavy-duty. The kind you can't kick in. Mike nodded. Ex-husband trouble. Something like that, I said. Family trouble. As the sound of drilling filled the house, I walked into the kitchen. I opened the fridge. It was stocked with expensive food, imported cheeses, organic steaks, bottles of wine. All bought with money that was supposed to secure my future. I grabbed a trash bag. I started clearing it out. Not the food, I would give that to a food bank, but the magnets on the fridge. The photos of Kevin holding trophies he didn't earn. The world's best mom magnet that I had bought her when I was 6, which she used to hold up Kevin's report cards. I threw them all in the trash. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. I answered. Lily? It was my father. His voice was small, broken, backed by the sound of highway traffic, and a loud TV in the background. Hello, Robert, I said. I couldn't bring myself to call him Dad. Lily, please, he rasped. Your mother, she's having a breakdown. The room is filthy. We don't have our things. We don't have our clothes. You have the clothes on your back, I said. Which is more than you would have left me if I had signed that loan. We're your parents, he cried, a flash of his old anger returning. You can't treat us like animals. We raised you. You didn't raise me, I said, leaning against the counter of my kitchen. You managed me. You managed me like a low-yield asset until you found a better one in Kevin. And when Kevin failed, you tried to liquidate me. We can fix this, he pleaded. Just drop the charges. Let us come home. We'll sign whatever you want. We'll pay you back. You have nothing to pay me back with, I said brutally. I've seen the ledger, Dad. I know about the DUI. I know about the gambling. I know about the fake medical bills. The only way you pay me back is by selling everything you own. Which, legally, is nothing, because I own the house and the bank owns your cars. Lily, don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just letting the consequences happen. Goodbye, Robert. I hung up and blocked the number. Mike the locksmith walked into the kitchen, tossing a set of shiny new keys onto the marble island. The sound of metal hitting stone rang out like a gavel. All done, he said. Nobody's getting in here unless you want them to. I picked up the keys. They felt cool and sharp in my hand. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. Not just physical safety, but the safety of knowing that the boundaries I set were made of steel, not just words they could ignore. Thank you, Mike, I said. You have no idea what this means. I turned to Sarah and Brenda. Okay. Tonight, we rest. Tomorrow, we start the inventory. Everything they bought with trust money. It gets sold. I want this house empty. The neighborhood of Whispering Pines was not accustomed to garage sales. It was the kind of gated community where people donated to charity silently and hired services to haul away their old furniture. So when I planted the estate sale sign on the manicured lawn of the Miller residence on a crisp Saturday morning, it caused a stir. But this wasn't just a sale. It was a purge. I had hired an estate liquidator, but I insisted on being there. I needed to see it go. I needed to see the physical manifestations of their greed leave my life piece by piece. The driveway was lined with their status. The oversized leather massage chair my father bought the month I struggled to pay for my car repairs. Sold for $200. The collection of designer handbags my mother claimed were investments, while telling me I couldn't afford dental work. Sold to a reseller for a flat fee. Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor who had watched the police raid from her window, came over. She was clutching her pearls, her eyes darting around the driveway like a bird looking for worms. Lily, dear, she whispered, leaning in close. Is it true? About the embezzlement? News traveled fast in suburbia. It is, Mrs. Peterson, I said loudly enough for the neighbors across the street to hear. It turns out my parents were spending my grandfather's inheritance. We're selling everything to pay back the trust. Mrs. Peterson gasped. Oh my. And I always thought they were so successful. Your mother always bragged about Kevin's businesses. Kevin's business was spending my money, I said with a smile. Would you like to buy a crystal vase? It's Italian. Mrs. Peterson bought the vase. She walked away clutching it, probably eager to tell the rest of the neighborhood that Joyce Miller was a fraud. That was the thing about fake status, once it cracks, people don't pity you. They devour you. Brenda was helping me organize the tables. She looked different. Lighter. She wasn't wearing the heavy makeup Kevin used to force her to wear. She was in jeans and a sweater, laughing as she haggled with a guy over a set of golf clubs. Hey, she said, walking over to me. Kevin called me from jail. He used his one call to scream at me about his golf clubs. Did you tell him they just sold for $50? I asked. I told him his lawyer fees are going to cost a lot more than that, Brenda smirked. He's terrified, Lily. The DA is adding charges. Apparently the investors he scammed for his consulting firm. They're coming forward. It's a Ponzi scheme. A small, pathetic Ponzi scheme. And Mom and Dad? They're staying with Aunt Carol, Brenda said. Apparently, Carol isn't too happy about it. Mom is trying to boss Carol around in her own house, and Carol is realizing that family helps family, has a limit when family is broke and facing felony charges. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Let them eat each other. By noon, the house was half empty. The echoing rooms felt cleaner. The air quality seemed to improve with every ugly painting that was carried out the door. I walked into the dining room. It was empty now, except for one thing. The folding chair. I had kept it in the corner, a stark reminder amidst the chaos of the sale. A woman in a fur coat walked in, looking around with disdain. "Is this chair for sale?" she asked, kicking the folding chair with her boot. "It's hideous." "No," I said. "That's not for sale. That's a museum piece." "A museum piece?" She looked at me like I was crazy. "It's a monument to resilience," I said. "It stays." She huffed and walked away. As the sun began to set, Sarah pulled up in her car. She had a bottle of champagne and a thick stack of legal files. "Happy liquidation day," she cheered, popping the cork right on the front porch. We sat on the front steps, watching the liquidators load the last of the unsold junk into a truck. "So," Sarah said, pouring the bubbly into plastic cups. "Update on the assets. The sale today covered the immediate property taxes and the legal retainer for Mr. Sterling. But to make the trust whole. To get back the $2 million. We can't," I said, looking at the empty driveway. "The money is gone, Sarah. They spent it on trips, cars, and gambling. You can't squeeze blood from a stone." "True," Sarah said, tapping the file. "But we can squeeze the future." Mr. Sterling secured a garnish order. "Any future income they have, Social Security, Dad's pension, any job Kevin manages to get after prison, a percentage comes to you. Forever. Until the debt is paid." "It's not about the money anymore," I said, taking a sip of the champagne. "It's about the tether. They wanted to control me with debt. Now I control them with theirs." "Justice looks good on you, Lily," Sarah said. I looked out at the street. The for sale sign for the house itself would go up tomorrow. I wasn't keeping the Colonial. It was a cursed house. I was selling it, taking the equity, which was legally mine via the trust, and moving on. "It does," I said. "But we have one last stop. The courtroom." "Ah, yes," Sarah grinned. "The grand finale. Are you ready to look them in the eye one last time?" "I'm not just ready," I said. "I'm looking forward to it." I stood up and poured the last drop of champagne onto the grass. A libation for the old Lily, the girl who cried in her car. She was gone. To the new management, I toasted. To the new management, Sarah and Brenda echoed. We laughed, and for the first time in that house, the laughter wasn't at anyone's expense. It was the sound of freedom. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. It wasn't the dramatic, high-ceilinged hall from the movies. It was a civil arbitration room, fluorescent lit and smelling of floor wax and anxiety. But the stakes were just as high. On one side of the long mahogany table sat my parents. They looked diminished. My father was wearing a suit that looked like it hadn't been pressed in weeks, because they were living out of suitcases at Aunt Carol's. My mother had aged 10 years in 10 days. Her roots were showing, a stark gray against the dyed blonde, a symbol of her loss of control. Kevin wasn't there. He was in a holding cell, awaiting his separate criminal trial. His absence hung over my parents like a phantom limb. On the other side sat me, Mr. Sterling, and Sarah. The arbitrator, a stern woman named Judge Reynolds, shuffled the thick stack of files, our evidence. "We are here to settle the civil claims regarding the Sterling Trust and the misappropriation of assets," Judge Reynolds said. Her voice was dry, cutting through the silence. "I have reviewed the forensic accounting provided by the plaintiff. It is extensive." My mother spoke up. She couldn't help herself. "Judge, please. There has to be a misunderstanding. We were the guardians. We had discretion. We spent that money on the family. Lily is part of the family. Therefore, we spent it on her." Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses. He didn't even look at her. He addressed the judge. "Your Honor, spending $45,000 on a criminal defense lawyer for a sibling is not benefiting the beneficiary. buying a boat titled in the father's name is not benefiting the beneficiary. And forging the beneficiary's signature to create a shell company for tax evasion is certainly not a discretionary act. It is fraud. It wasn't fraud. Dad slammed his hand on the table, though it lacked his usual power. It was management. We were going to pay it back. Once Kevin's business took off. The Ponzi scheme. I interrupted. I spoke quietly, but my voice carried. You were waiting for his Ponzi scheme to pay back my inheritance. Dad deflated. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Lily. Look at us. We are your parents. We are homeless. We are humiliated. Haven't you punished us enough? Just drop the claim. Let us keep the pension. Please. For a second, the old programming kicked in. The guilt. The instinct to fix their mess. They're old. They're pathetic. Then I remembered the dinner. I remembered we only invited you out of pity. I remembered the plan to saddle me with $300,000 of debt. I looked at Dad. You didn't invite me to dinner to feed me, Dad. You invited me to eat me. You were going to consume my financial future to save yourselves. You don't get a pass just because you failed at it. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I am requesting the maximum judgment. Full restitution. Liquidation of all remaining assets, including their personal retirement accounts which were commingled with trust funds. And I want the no-contact order made permanent. Mom let out a sob. It was a jagged, ugly sound. How can you be so cruel? I carried you for 9 months. And you've been charging me rent for it ever since, I said. The debt is paid, Mom. We're even. Judge Reynolds nodded. She banged her gavel. It wasn't a loud bang, but it sounded like the closing of a heavy door. Judgment for the plaintiff, she ruled. The court finds that Robert and Joyce Miller breached their fiduciary duty with malice. All assets listed in Exhibit A are to be seized and transferred to the trust. A permanent restraining order is granted. This session is adjourned. The reality hit them. It wasn't a negotiation. It was over. Mr. Sterling began packing up his briefcase. Sarah gave me a high five under the table. My parents didn't move. They sat there, frozen. As I stood up to leave, my mother looked up. Her eyes were dry now, filled with a cold, hard venom. You think you won, she hissed. But you'll be alone. You have no family left. Kevin hates you. We hate you. You'll die alone in that big house. I stopped. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that her hate couldn't touch me anymore. It was like smoke trying to grasp a stone. I'm not alone, Mom, I said. I gestured to Sarah, who was standing fiercely by my side. I gestured to the door, where Brenda was waiting with Emma. I have a family. I just chose a better one. And as for the house, I added, buttoning my coat. I sold it this morning. Above asking price. I'm moving to Tahoe. You know, the cabin you tried to hide from me. It's going to be beautiful. I turned my back on them. Lily. Dad called out. Lily, wait. I didn't wait. I walked out of the courtroom, down the long marble hallway, and out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the afternoon. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like guilt anymore. It smelled like the future. The war was over. I had won. But more importantly, I had survived. 6 months later, the air in Lake Tahoe is different. It's crisp, smelling of pine needles and cold, clean water. It clears your head. I stood on the deck of the cabin, my cabin. It wasn't the dark, musty rental unit my parents had maintained. I had spent the last 6 months renovating it. The walls were knocked down to let the light in. The floors were refinished warm oak. It was a space that breathed. I held a mug of tea, watching the sun dip below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Aunt Lily. Look. I looked down to the shoreline. Emma, now 6 years old, was holding up a giant pine cone. Brenda was sitting on a blanket nearby, reading a book. She looked younger, happier. She had used her share of the divorce settlement, which I helped her secure by providing the trust evidence, to go back to school. She was studying graphic design. That's a huge one, Em. I shouted back. The screen door behind me opened. Sarah walked out, carrying a bowl of popcorn. Project update, she said, popping a kernel into her mouth. The final transfer cleared. The Colonial is officially closed. The new owners are a nice young couple who have no idea about the drama that happened in their dining room. Good, I said. Let them fill it with new memories. And, Sarah added, her voice turning a bit more serious. I got a notification. Kevin's trial date is set. He's taking a plea deal. 3 years. And my parents? Still at Carol's. But Carol is kicking them out next month. Apparently, Mom tried to reorganize Carol's kitchen and criticized her cooking one too many times. They're applying for subsidized senior housing. I took a sip of tea. A year ago, that news would have crushed me with guilt. I would have been on the phone, offering to pay for an apartment, offering to save them. Now? I just felt a distant pity. Like reading about a stranger's misfortune in the newspaper. They made their bed, I said. And they are sleeping in it, Sarah agreed. She leaned against the railing next to me. You know, you could have taken it all. You could have left them with nothing. But you let them keep the pension. I didn't want their misery, I said. I just wanted my life back. The pension keeps them fed. It keeps them away from me. That's a price I'm willing to pay. I looked out at the lake again. It was calm. This journey hadn't just been about money. It was about rewriting the definition of my own worth. For 30 years, I thought my value was calculated by how much I could endure, how much I could give, how much I could fix. I thought love was a transaction. I give you my soul, you give me crumbs of approval. But I learned the hard way. Love isn't a transaction. Abuse is. Real love is what Brenda did when she handed me that envelope in the rain. Real love is Sarah digging through spreadsheets at 2 a.m. to protect me. Real love is Mr. Sterling keeping a file for 2 years because he promised a dead man he would look after me. I walked down the steps to the beach. The cold sand crunched under my boots. I sat down next to Brenda. She smiled at me. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. I was just thinking about the folding chair. The one you kept. Yeah. I put it in my office here, I said. I sit in it when I have to make a tough decision. It reminds me that I never have to make myself small to fit at someone else's table again. If they don't offer me a seat, I build my own table. Emma ran up and threw the pine cone in my lap. Your turn to throw it. I laughed. I stood up and threw the pine cone as hard as I could into the lake. It made a satisfying splash, sending ripples out across the water. The ripples would fade. The water would return to being smooth and glass-like. Just like my life. The storm was over. The sun was down. And for the first time in 32 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there. If you are holding on to a relationship, family, friend, or partner, just because you share history, remember, history is not an obligation to endure abuse. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to check the receipts. And you have the right to build your own table. Please, if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and resilience. And leave a comment below telling me, what is the one thing you need to let go of to be free? I'll be reading them. Take care of yourselves and remember, you are worth more than what they say. Goodbye for now.